welcome everyone. Graham's such a stimulating speaker, your brain gets whizzing. I'm just here to slow it down a bit and get you to relax. And I know if I want 25 worms in a shovel, I need a bigger shovel. So Jenny and I are a mixed farming operation at Illabo, where we work as a team. There's just Jenny and I. She puts the crop in, drives the disc seeder, and she drives the semi at harvest, generally about 100 loads in a semi to GrainCorp, Junee. So we're both very active on the farm. Quite a mixed operation. I used to be part of a larger family operation with 100% cropping. I sort of got burnt out because I had 30 years of spraying. So for me, it was important to get away from spraying and get back to mixed farming. So my views on the world are I'm sort of a burnt-out spray rig driver. So we got farming on our own in 2014, and we find the easiest way to show what we do is just pictures, talk to pictures, and movies that tell stories. We've been strip and disc, and we're gradually increasing our sheep because we had really poor infrastructure for a start. And we're now getting into dual-purpose multi-species crops, and that's working really well for us. Some of the things we've been doing since we've been in and around VicNoTill, we were disc seeding 2011, stripper front 2018. We were doing a lot of that before we got into VicNoTill, and then since VicNoTill we've been cutting fungicides and insecticides and just changing the way we do our farming. This is the year in review last year, and this year is looking very similar for us. Our biggest risk is frost, and our second biggest risk is wet. And this year we're too wet. 2 days ago I was bogged in the Polaris in the morning, bogged in the Ute in the afternoon. We can't traffic our paddocks at the moment. We've probably got 5% of our crop we didn't get in because we're too wet. The air seeder's still bogged in waist-high stripper straw. We got the tractors out, the air seeder's been there for 3 or 4 weeks. We've probably got 5% of the crop that's drowned, and we've probably got another 2 or 3% that's been eaten by slugs, slaters, rabbits. So at the moment we've probably got 10 to 15% of the crops are right off. So we're really well set up for a dry spring. This is not the year for it. The dog in the picture is Sparky. You'll see later on that there's a lot of Sparky films, which is what Jenny does. The real story for us, this is just Google Earth imagery. Our property on the right-hand side, bounded by the yellow mark. We've got ground cover. This is 2018, really dry. The neighbours around us have got full dams, no ground cover. We've got dry dams generally, and we're maintaining a strip of straw, trying to get moisture for cropping opportunities. Here's sort of March 2018, early March. Here I was sowing canola. We had moisture to get the crop up, no one else did. The dust storm rolling through, put through about 5 millimetres, which didn't help the locals, but we were able to get canola in up and away. Grazing canola, ideal disc sowing conditions, dry straw, but having the ground cover, retaining the moisture, gives us the opportunity to plant when we want to. Not always, but a lot of the time. This is, to get the ground cover, we've got a stripper front. We got a long way with a draper front, but a stripper front just helps a bit more. Here's a short movie of the stripper front in action, and just to show you how smooth and how quiet it is and how it works. And that didn't play. Okay. Can't get it to play. Okay. What do we got to do? We have a complicated PowerPoint situation. Okay. This is the following one. If we could do the one before it, please, if possible. So machine runs very quiet because it's not under much load. Very smooth. There's about 5 tonne a hectare wheat crop, probably doing about 55 tonnes an hour. Just going very smoothly. And for any TikTok people, don't stand between the chaser bin and the header front. It's not wise. Only with your game. So this was our first year with the stripper front, 2018. This has given us the straw to give us the water retention and the ground cover that we're after. If you're listening to Costa on Gardening Australia, our farming is all about good gardening. We want straw for mulch, we want moisture retention, and we want weed suppression. And this helps us get through that system. Now we're on to the next one of where we're seeding into that same straw. So we're running a old 1990s flexi-coil bar with Boss disc seeding units going at about 10 k's an hour, 7.5-inch row spacing. This is sowing canola in early April. Because of the close row spacing, the straw gets pretty well flattened and the paddock looks like it's been harrowed. So the locals don't know whether you've harrowed it or whether you've sown it until the crop comes up. So Jenny drives that seeder, so when you want to talk disc seeding, she knows a lot about it. This is the 970 canola sown in the March in the dust storm, where no one else had crops up. We got crops up and away. We had enough moisture. We often grow them as a multi-species. We'll often chuck in 10 kilos of wheat or barley because it's no cost and it's simple, and chuck in a legume if you've got it, lentils or vetch. And then when the sheep graze it in around that June, July, we then spray the companions out and take the canola to harvest. So this is with the lentil mix. Often we just let the lentils go to harvest because they're so short. They don't get in the grain, and the sheep love them as dry grazing over summer. This year we use vetch. And this is what the crop turns into later on. Some of our crops won't be this good this year because they're too wet. But this is the neighbour's view as they drive past. They're looking across your canola crop. This is probably the agronomist's view as he's looking down into the crop, and you've got 3 years of background straw. You've got barley straw, wheat straw, and the prior canola straw. So we've got lots of ground cover, healthy soil. And then when you start to peel the straw away, you then start to see lots of fine root hairs from the crop. And it seems to be when we've got high residue systems, you end up with a lot of fine root hairs trying to break down in the mulch. And then we end up with soil structure improvements and worms, and quite surprising in canola crops, but this system seems to be working for us. This is the 970 crop sown in March, and what happens is because it was sown so early, it's got its roots down into the moisture at the end of 2018, whereas the spring crop beside it hasn't. It's run out of moisture, it's droughted, it's frosted. So our spring canola there went 200 to 300 kilos a hectare. The 970 canola went about 1.8, 1.9 tonnes a hectare, and no one else harvested grazing canolas that year in our area. But it needed time to get its roots down so it didn't run out of moisture, and was such a fantastic result for a dry year. Then we get into some grazing mixes. We do a similar thing with Bennett wheat, long season grazing, planted in February or March if you can. This year we went in April, we were busy spreading lime. We find these work really well for the sheep. Good multi-species, probably a bit like what Grant Sims has been doing for us. And normally we put in vetch, tillage radish, purple top turnips, 970 canola. It's easy to chuck in retained canola seed because you just keep it from the year before. It's a no-cost thing. So chuck canola in your grazing wheat, chuck wheat in your grazing canola, and then terminate it. Some of the agronomists are worried about disease carryover and things, but you terminate it before it goes reproductive, and it makes such a wonderful balance for the stock grazing. They put on a lot of weight. The trouble is I've only got a 2-bin cart with no small seeds, so the only way I can get a decent mix is to put it in layers in bulker bags and then put it up the auger into the seed cart. Otherwise, if I try and tip it in casually, I'll end up with 2 rounds of tillage radish and then 1 of vetch, and it doesn't work out very well. So ideally, I'd love a 3-bin cart with small seeds so that I can turn things on and off and mix them up. The other thing is, how do you inoculate the legume in the system? What I found the easiest way to do is we treat all our seed with biostimulants, Nutrisoil, CS Red, just any of the worm-type products. But if you mix the inoculant with it and you inoculate it up the auger into the seed cart, so everything has the inoculant on it, everything has the biostimulant on it, rather than trying to, probably in the early years, I would inoculate the vetch and then try and mix it with everything, and it just took so much time, we're so slow. So there's sort of got to be better ways to do it. And when the sheep are grazing these mixes, they pick different plants at different times. As they ripen, some are bitter, some are sweet. And if you can get them in earlier, the radishes and the turnips get large and the vetch gets large. And we just went one too many. And this is the sheep on grazing Bennett. It doesn't look like a wheat crop, but the sheep are doing really well. We usually graze these through about mid-August. Then we take the sheep off, let a little bit of recovery, and then spray all the companions out. And then it turns into this, which is far better than what you expect. But it mightn't do so well in a dry spring finish. But in these longer season years, this has been working really well for us. And once again, the Bennett wheat is in early. It gets a large root mass. It doesn't run out of moisture as much. We're normally half winter wheats, half spring wheats. Our spring wheat, because our number one risk is frost. How do we mitigate frost? So what we're doing is we're shanding 5 varieties together to try and spread the flowering date. And we're not worried when we plant it, because you're putting in a shandy. Was that the right week or the wrong week? We just put it in when we get to it. But the idea is we're trying to spread the flowering, and we're also trying to spread the rust risk. So in the line up there, don't tell GrainCorp we do this, but even though they're gold sponsors, we put in a slow variety like Cooler. It'll stay greener for longer, and it benefits from a wet harvest. We put in a really fast variety like Mustang, which does really well in a bobtail spring, and then 3 of the main season spring wheats, which are for yield. But we find in these years like this, last year, the Cooler kept putting on yield because the harvest was still raining. The Mustang had already set seed and had finished. Generally, it just looks like a normal crop. You drive past it. Generally, when we look down into it, similar thing of lots of background straw. When we start to peel away the straw, this paddock was waterlogged and really wet, so there's moss and algae growing in it, but there's still worm activity. So the straw system's working well for us. And then as the year ripens up, this is last year's crop, and then you start to see the variety differences. Doesn't impact on harvesting, but apart from varying height of crops, you've sometimes got to have your front lower because some of them are quite short. But if you're wanting living roots in the soil for longer, you've just picked up another 2 weeks because of the long season variety in it. If you move to a winter wheat grazing mix, you're then putting a month or 2 on the front end of it, which is another 20 or 40% of green roots in the system. If we go to the winter wheats grazing mix or the canolas, because we're putting them in early, we're often saving ourselves 1 or 2 summer sprays. So we're cutting our chemical usage a bit by having a growing crop early in the year if we've got the moisture with the system. And then often with this system, we have different qualities and yields to what conventional farmers do. All the farmers around us were having low falling numbers problems. Our falling numbers were fine this year. It's often the same with screenings. They had low test weight canolas, we had high test weight canolas. So we're just sort of in a different farming system, different outcomes. Some years we've put in 10 kilos of vetch with the spring wheat, but because you sow it in May, the vetch isn't very vigorous. Unlike when you put it in with the grazing mixes in early, it gets quite a go on. And once again, the vetch is easy to take out later on. But we find when we've put 10 kilos of vetch in with the wheat, that the wheats are visually greener. They don't visually have the need for the same nitrogen level. So we feel there's things in the system working for us. Part of our plan of reducing fungicides, this is a Bennett wheat grazing mix in a canola stubble. We're just starting to get hot spots in the foreground of stripe rust. Our first strategy for managing stripe rust is we put the sheep in on it. And the idea is in sort of this early August, if we put the sheep in on it and we eat all the leaf off the wheat, we get rid of the rust. And that saves us one fungicide. The sheep get really orange on the face and orange down the legs. And you can see when they've been doing the job properly for you. And it's quite distinctive, but it's a simple and effective method in a crop like Bennett that's very susceptible to rust. And the idea is we want to reduce our fungicides because we want mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. The top 10 centimetres of the soil is for all your critters and your bugs and things, and where there's oxygen, but to go below that and get soil improvement, you need mycorrhizal fungi. So if we can reduce our fungicides, but with Bennett wheat, we still have to use a fungicide. Last year we had 2 stripe rust sprays, the prior year it was only 1, but we don't use a heavy rate, we use a modest rate, but we always do it with a foliar nutrition. We want to make the plant healthier, more resistant to frost stress, heat stress, disease stress, but we still have to use a fungicide on those paddocks. But we don't use fungicides on seed dressings, we don't put impact on fertiliser. We've eliminated all those fungicides, and it's just covering for stripe rust. And generally with the spring wheat mixes, we haven't had to use it, but we had to do one paddock last year, which was adjoining the Bennett wheat, which was a high infection area. Insecticides, similarly, trying to cut insecticides. This is the canola paddock that was sown in with the disc seeder footage earlier on into heavy wheat straw. The difference here in this image is the difference in insecticide seed dressing on the canola. We had one lot of seed which had Poncho Plus on it, which covered lucerne flea. And then when that ran out, we went back to a seed that only had gaucho, and that all got chewed out. So the plants germinated, came up through the straw, but they got eaten. So we find to get canola in our system, we need to use insecticides to get canola establishment and pasture establishment. So this year, it was a wet year. We put all our canola seed was put in with fipronil, which is Cosmos or Onslaught to take care of slaters and lucerne flea. And then some of the paddocks got Lemat as the double knock with paraquat. And then we've been back in and slug baited and slater baited quite a bit of it twice. But we've still got quite a few patches where we've lost the crop. But just trying to get canola through heavy straw in wet conditions. Canola sown prior in the first 2 weeks of April was fine. Canola sown after the first 2 weeks of third week of April came under a lot of pressure. And very typically of what we see in our soil, of slaters and things breaking down straw and residue. And this is on the front of the windrower at windrowing time, where we're not using insecticides later in the year in the crop. And what we're doing is we're waiting for the beneficials to build up in numbers. And we find because we're using foliar nutritionals later in the year that the plant's a bit more resilient, and that it's not that we don't have aphid infections, we always have aphids, but the numbers build up good enough to cover them. They don't get to the economic threshold of needing the spray. But we're not idealistic. If it comes down to it and we have to spray, we will. Because all these systems we're talking about, you've got to make money. You've got to be able to buy the place next door or pay off your debt or buy a house in town for your mum and dad. So we don't want to be too idealistic. We want to make money, but we're doing the best we can to improve our soil and get infiltration. There is a delivery standard at GrainCorp for too many lady beetles, but if you're lucky, they fly out of the sample in the sample stand before they notice. And in reducing the insecticides, we're just seeing more activity in the paddock of dung beetles and just general life. Things are happening for us. With barley, so we're on a basic rotation of canola, wheat, barley. The areas on the farm that we're cropping, we're 100% cropping. The areas that we've got pasture, we never want to crop again because they're frosty or they're wet or they're rocky. So we're continuous cropping on half the farm. The other half of the farm is long-term perennial pastures, and we'll renovate the pastures, but we don't want to crop those areas again because they're like the frosty creek flats with the knee-high canola. With barley, we tend to grow planet barley because we want weed competition, we want canopy. This is the neighbour's view looking across the top of the barley crops. And as you look down into it, we've got good competition, good weed suppression, and then we've got years of background of straw, of the prior wheat straw, the prior canola straw, the prior barley straw. And then as we start to peel back the layers, we can see fungi starting to break down some of the straw, so we're improving our soil, we're getting better infiltration. And then once you go below the straw, you're starting to get lots of worm castings. So we're improving our soils, but they're shallow. What we need to improve with time is to get depth in our soil. So we need time to do that. And then we're starting to get sort of just better soil structure, which is working well for us. So for conventional farmers to drive past, our paddocks look untidy. There's lots of straw, lots of up and down, but we're really improving our soils. With seed dressings, I put this in because we use biostimulant seed dressings in replace to conventional ones. But what I've done here is bought a new variety of wheat, commercial seed. It's got commercial pickle on it, but put the biostimulant on it anyway. It works. This is the cheapest thing you can do for your farm to get started down this path. Just change your seed dressing. The second cheapest thing you can do is change your fertiliser dressing. Put a carbon source with it rather than putting impact on it. But this stuff works. This stuff's really simple. If you spill it on yourself, it's not going to kill you. It smells nice. With our fertiliser, we've been mixing a carbon source since the VicNoTill Joel Williams day 4 or 5 years ago. It was the first thing we chose. We came away from that field day in spring and decided we had to put a carbon source with our fertiliser. So we tried a couple of different ones, but what we're down to is Omnia Ferticoat, because it comes in a 1,000 litre IBC and you just pump it on. And it's quite easy for us to use. We're still using urea in the system. We're still using MAP. We've cut our MAP down the tube. We're now putting 40 to 50 kilos down the tube. The other half of our phosphorus we're putting on as Superfect at 2 to 4 leaf, just spread. And what we're finding is it's sped up sowing logistics, which has been good. But the idea of the Superfect is as the MAP gets used or locked up, we're prolonging the available phosphorus later in the year, trying to have phosphorus available up to flowering and reproduction. So by splitting the phosphorus application, it's made seeding easier, but then it's given me 1,200 hectares of spreading to do as well. So, and the anecdotal evidence is that farmers that are using more Superfect in the system rather than MAPs and DAPs, it's giving them a better frosting profile in their plants. There's something about it that is making the system healthier. And so if we were being idealistic, we'd go to liquids down the tube to get the crop up out of the ground to cut the MAP. But there's steps we haven't got to yet. And really simply, I just get it out of an IBC and put it in a little 12-volt sprayer. I know the pump does 5 litres a minute, so I'm roughly getting on the rate I'm after. Then the next thing we're doing is foliar nutritionals. At the moment, we're doing these as a reproductive spray later in the year as things start to flower and need it then. Ideally, we should be doing this earlier in the year as well, or multiples of it, to keep the plant healthy. But the key thing we're after frost management. If we can get the plant healthy and the sugars right, that it can handle a bit of cold stress, a bit of drought stress. This might keep the aphids off the canola. It might ease the rust on the wheat. But once again, the complicated mixes, and then all of a sudden you're mixing this stuff up and deciding, I'll put those 3 herbicides with it, and you're busy doing jug tests and blocking filters, and So it adds a bit of complexity, but I'd rather be out spraying foliar and nutritionals than spraying herbicides. But also this is trying to get our system healthy, trying to get more resilient. This is a story of 3 years ago, NDVI image, paddock lower right, really strong image, strong crop. It's our farm that we've been farming since 2010, full stubble retention. It's a dry year. That year we bought the paddock next door, which is the upper left, sort of half a kilometre apart, same rainfall, same inputs, same sowing time, same everything. And this is what I sent to the agronomist at the time. It was because our old system of stubble retention, we were growing a lot more barley than the new paddock that we'd bought. This is the new paddock we bought, totally bare, no ground cover, characterised by full dams, poor infiltration, raised dust, and rock hard. And when we stood in the paddock with the agronomist, they stood there and said, "You've got no topsoil." But anyway, so we bought that. We knew it was going to be dry. It didn't have moisture. So we decided we were going to put Latrobe barley in it, which was a shorter moisture requirement than Planet. Here's our existing stubble in the same image, the views of retained stubble. And we had good moisture in this paddock. So this was 2019, really dry. This is the new paddock. It's green, but it's really short. But once again, for a low rainfall year, why is the dam full? Really short. Here's the same image of the Planet barley and the retained stubble paddock. And such a strong difference in a dry year for us. Here's stripper straw. Stripper straw is normally a lot taller than that, but that's as good as the Latrobe barley did for us. It went 1.7 tonnes a hectare. Here's a stripper straw of the Planet barley. Same input, same sowing day, same fertiliser, same chemicals. And this went 3.7 tonnes a hectare in a dry year. So it was such a strong difference for moisture retention. So this is really good in dry years. We're not doing so well this year, but it averages out. Here's an image of, this is October 12, 2018. Once again, a dry year. This is in the same paddock as the good barley. We're looking to the south. Everyone's run out of moisture. Everything's dead in the tree lot. There's no moisture. Everyone's really frustrated with the year. And could we get that one to play as well, if possible? So this is looking at everything's run out of moisture, October 12, 2018, and this is our wheat crop at the same time. We haven't run out of moisture. The wheat crops, the neighbour sowed his on the same day, same fertiliser, same chemical, very similar, just the background history of better soil and moisture retention. And in its dry years, we really stand out. This is January this year, looking off the veranda of the house. Pouring rain, our heavy wheat stubble in the foreground, really excellent infiltration. The creeks are coming through from the neighbour's full. The neighbour's loosened paddock across the road looks like it's got infiltration like concrete. It's been grazed bare, it's quite hard. All the water's just sheeting off it. There's a lot of dirt in the water. Come to now, our crop in the heavy stubble, there's missing patches from rabbits and slugs and slaters. His canola is fantastic. High nitrogen. He was making dust when he was sowing. The soil's really hard. But in a wet year like this, he's had enough moisture and he's at high nitrogen. His crop's brilliant. He wouldn't want our farming system at all. And then this was 10 days ago on our place. 50 millimetres of rain. We were trying to be shearing. It kept pouring down. But the runoff from our farm, the water is clear. Could we press play on this one as well? So we're getting clear runoff and a lot less of it. So our system is working. We're retaining more moisture. The residues are working. It's been really good for us. Now we're on to sheep. Well, we moved back into mixed farming in 2014 because I was burnt out from spraying, and we're in a mixed farming area. If we're too frosty, too wet, we need to balance things out with sheep. So we've been growing permanent pastures down on the creek, and we tend to be cropping the hills, the rising elevation. A lot of our yield maps look like elevation maps. As soon as you go off the hill, everything gets frosted and low yielding. What we've been doing is sowing pasture mixes of lucens, clovers, perennial grasses. We sow them in April after the canola, but before the wheats and barleys, and then we let them go through to spring, like here, to seed down. And then after that, we try and maintain them with grazing management to try and maintain the legume content, which is a challenge. With our sheep, we run barley feeders with them. We started putting barley feeders with them for some of the year when we were short on feed, but what we've found is now every sheep has access to a barley feeder every single day of the year. They get 200 to 300 grams of barley per head per day, whether they're in a barley stubble, a lush pasture, a dual-purpose multi-species crop. And what we found is when we divided the mob in half and had half on barley feeders on unlimited pasture and half on unlimited pasture without barley, we got 0.5 kilo more wool off the ewes. The lambs were 5 kilos heavier at sale time, and we had a higher lambing percentage, which was probably more about lamb survival because the mother had more milk and more energy. So we've now made it so that every sheep has barley every day of the year. And then when we're in the lush grazing crops of the multi-species wheats and canola, we put a hay rack with them because there's so much liquid in the grazing crops. They just need a bit of hay to balance it out. So the sheep don't eat much barley when they're on the stubbles. But what is a good indicator for us is as soon as the feed runs out on the stubble, you see them camp around the feeder and they hit it hard. You then know it's time to move, but you haven't bared the paddock. Whereas otherwise we'd see them bearing the paddock, destroying the ground cover, and it's too late, we better get them out of there. Whereas now everything looks normal, but they're all lined up at the feeders. And we find that works. It's beneficial to us whether the barley's $400 a tonne or less. For some reason, Jenny's always got the book transfer at the harvest low. I think the sheep bought their barley at $170 this year. The other thing we're doing is the difference the dual-purpose crops make for us, the multi-species crops, that sheep that are on the feeders and unlimited pasture compared to sheep that are on the feeders in the dual-purpose crops, the lambs gain another 5 kilos. So now we've set our rotations up and our cropping up so that every sheep has a dual-purpose canola, multi-species, June into July, and then out of July into August they get a dual-purpose multi-species wheat. And we just see the condition starts to stack on the lambs and stack on the ewes, and we're finding that a really good system for the sheep. We have been chaff lining a lot as well. It doesn't work for us in the wet years. Just the technical thing of the chaff lining chute blocks up with wet residue or residue you can't smash up with the header properly, and the header blocks from the back to the front, which is not much fun. So we didn't chaff line this year. The chaff lining chute's sitting in the middle of the first paddock we started on when me, the header driver, spat the dummy and took it off. We're softies. We like potty lambs. When we go to the Illabo hotel and have a beer with the locals, you only have potty lambs if you're a hobby farmer or if you've got kids. But Jenny and I, we see mismothered lambs and orphans and we bring them home. But what I wanted to show you here was out of all the things we've ever bought, stripper fronts, disc seeders, this is the best machine that we have ever bought. Could we play this one, please? This is an automatic lamb feeder. Tip the milk in the top, the milk powder in the top. It mixes it and keeps it warm. It keeps it at 37 degrees, 24 hours a day, and the lambs get it on demand whenever they want it. We were still trying to plug this thing in and they're sucking the teats off it. And this has been great for us. It's given us it's given us spare time back, which is really important. But what happens is one of those machines can handle up to 180 lambs. So you can go as hard as you want. Kiwis use them. They go out and pull out every triplet off and take it home and put it on a feeder. So there's other people around the world. Dairy farmers are probably used to this sort of thing. We croppers aren't. But the lambs love it. And what we find is the lambs have no longer got a big pot belly because they're drinking on demand like they would from their mum. And every time they go to it, it's at 37 degrees. And every 5 minutes all day, this little propeller mixes it up. It's about $8,500, but if you look at it in terms of probably saving maybe 40 lambs, you've got it covered. So, but what's required with it is 10 minutes of cleaning each day, every second day, because on the heating element, the milk powder gets a bit crusty and starts to go off. So 10 minutes every second day, clean it up. Pastures, here's a look at our pasture mixes. We try and maintain a reasonable balance of legume and perennial grasses. We like perennials. Once again, we're trying to maintain ground cover. This is in spring, trying to let it seed down. It's got pretty wild. We haven't got enough sheep to control it. But then this is the same paddock later in the year. So we've still got our legume content, but it's about grazing pressure. And coming from cropping, some of our paddocks are a bit too big. You put 500 sheep into that, in 90 hectares of that stuff, and they eat one corner out. So we need a bit more subdivision. That's the sort of mixes we've been using. We've found that's working well. And the main thing is, the other thing with the barley feeders is it's allowing us to maintain more ground cover in our pastures because they're eating less grass, but also they're digesting the grass better because they've got the protein source from the barley. So the barley's better utilising the pastures on offer, but also we're looking after our country better. There's the pasture mix seed. What I'm going to finish off with is just a short harvest movie, just so you sort of ties it all together, sort of shows what we do, a bit of stripper front action, a bit of stuff at the end for the Grain Corp sponsors at their site. But anyway, just sit back and enjoy a bit of a movie for a couple of minutes.
Looks like there's rain up ahead, like there's a crack in the heavens. Feels like my day could be turning, like I can tell that my luck's gonna change. If you could see me now, I'd probably let you down, but that's enough for me. You got me begging, baby. Looks like I'm on my knees again. Feels like the walls are closing in. Looks like I'm on my knees again. Got me begging, baby. Looks like I'm on my knees again. Feels like the walls are closing in. Looks like I'm on my knees again.
So that's almost a wrap-up for what we do, but it's certainly going to be another stormy year for us by the look of it, and I'm going to need chains and snatch straps at harvest. But that sort of pretty well wraps us up, but we've just got one more little thing to finish on. And this won't improve your soil carbon, it won't improve your infiltration, it might improve your life, and it might improve your relationship when you go home. But we've just recently finished building a shearing shed. We finished it on the 1st of August, started shearing on the 2nd of August. So we'll just play a little movie in a minute of a new shearing shed complex. But the key thing in this is there's a lot of new sheds out there, a lot of good ideas. This one's just tricked up with a few more. The idea is catching pens that reduce in size so that the shearer doesn't have to drag the sheep as far. There's acoustic panelling around the walls to cut the noise to reduce the stress on the sheep. There's acoustic panelling on the main work area to reduce the stress on the sheep. There's wall bins that go up and down to move presses and things about. There's dust suppression sprinklers outside. But this shed's got most things you want. But anyway, we'll just enjoy this project. We've just finished it. Well, thank you very much for that.